Hello, Necedah School Community. This is Tanya Kotlowski, the Superintendent for Necedah Area School District. I am live to you today from our school building to share what is our third of a three-part series regarding budget information. We have now updated our numbers to include the certified information that we got in October. At this point, our board has approved a budget for 22-23, and I'm sharing with you some of those projections and the impact today. I'm going to be sharing some direct impact for you as a taxpayer and on the Necedah school community. So the next part I wanted to talk about, I ended last time with some information regarding shared costs. And the other pieces I wanted to talk about today include some of the ways of which are impacting our finance strategy and the things that we have done and some of the outcomes of those strategies. So this is an example of our refinance strategy that our board approved in terms of, I think it was in 19, in terms of how we are going to step down that debt service payment. And so we knew that at the 2023 year here that I have circled, we were dropping down by a couple $100,000 a year plus. So that was going to be very beneficial. We know we're heading into a biennium budget. We also knew that we needed to potentially pass an operational referendum in order to meet the increasing needs of our operational budget to sustain our programs. And so as part of that, we did a step down approach to pay off as much as we could up front and then to address a less of a payment in order to meet the needs that we may have regarding the debt we were looking at in terms of a deficit budget. And so this refinance strategy allowed us to do that. So that had an impact on where we are today. This is a kind of an example of what used to be considered a 2/3 funding formula. So the calculation that's used to determine the total authorized revenue limit a school district can bring in from both a taxpayer perspective, local taxpayers, as well as the equalization aid, which comes to us in aid from the state level. Between both of those things, we have our revenue cap. That calculation is always capped, but the proportion of that cap that's given by either taxpayers or through the equalization aid has shifted. And so on this graph, it's just important to note what things have shifted for our Necedah school community, because we sort of are at a place of an inverted, what was to be at one point sort of a commitment at the state level to be funding schools at 2/3. We now, as local taxpayers, we are actually funding our district by almost 60%, and the state is funding it at 41%. And so that's an important thing to note, because when it comes to the revenue cap, our taxpayers are funding a significant portion of our revenue limit. And there are reasons for that, and there are things I can get into about that, but I'm not going to do that today. I just wanted to basically show you how that has shifted over the years, since being funded at 65% in 2008 through the equalization aid to now being funded at 41% in 2018, and to where we are today, which is about 41%. So there are some things, in my opinion, and the opinion of many school districts around the state, as you can see by the number of operational referenda on the ballot even next week in November of 22. The result of that is that there's a sort of broken formula that is included in how schools decide what the authorized revenue they can bring into their district, how that's calculated. And so we are, one of the things that I have a big concern about in our Necedah school community is our funding formula includes property wealth. Well, our property wealth kind of determines the amount of state aid we get and the amount our taxpayers are going to get. In general, the more wealthy property a district has, the more their local taxpayers pick up. And so in our school district, we have property wealth that does not represent the demographics of our community. And so we as a school district are considered a negative tertiary district. And so our local taxpayers contribute heavily to the equalization aid formula, meaning that our local taxpayers are funding elsewhere other than just their Necedah school community. And so it is important for me to continue to advocate on behalf of our community that the way things are structured in our calculation, in my opinion, it's broken when we consider the property wealth versus the demographics of our school community. Again, back in the very first session I talked about some of those demographics. And when we look at those demographics, that certainly doesn't depict what we've been pegged as having as property wealth in our whole school community. The property wealth is based on lakefront primarily, and that doesn't represent those who live and work in our community. The other thing I just wanted to mention is our state has gone the direction the last few years, several years, of districts having to go to their community and ask for a referendum to be able to operationalize their school. So as a matter of fact, this November, we have 92 districts in the state of Wisconsin asking that of their community. That doesn't include the ones who are currently under an operational referendum or those who just passed it in April, such as we did in April of 22. So that's a lot of money that is going to support referenda, and I believe the state of Wisconsin, through legislation, has decided that that's the way they're going to fund schools. My issue with that is going to a referendum within a community is expensive, and it causes a lot of divisiveness in communities that I don't think is necessary when we know what we need to fund the education of our children. And so this is an issue, again, I think, of our formula and why we really need to look at some changes there. So in April of 2018, our community was generous to pass a referenda question that included $690,000 and $750,000 over the course of 4 years. And so I put down here information that could be helpful, because as we headed into that referendum in April of 2018, we had given our community projections regarding the tax rate or mill rate that they would be anticipating. This graph shows what we projected and what the actual was, and then what the state average was. So when you look at this chart, you'll be able to tell on here where things were at in terms of what we communicated ahead of time, what they actually were, and then of course the state average. So we are falling well below state average in all these cases, and I anticipate again we will in 21-22. I just don't have that average at this time. What we're looking at for 22-23, this is with the operational referendum that passed in April of 22. We were projecting a 7.89, and we are at a 6.68. So I also suspect we'll be fairly lower than the state average at this point as well. Right now, out of our eight district conference, we are the lowest in our conference. So over the course of these 4 years of our first operational referendum, we were able to save $7.09 mill rate over 4 years, or a savings of $700 on a $100,000 home. Sorry about that. There were some other things that our board did. We under levied for 2 years, which means we've been authorized through the revenue limit calculation to ask our local taxpayers for a certain amount, and we did not take all that was authorized. And so there were 2 years that we did that because of some extra funding that we realized that we hadn't put into our calculations. And so we did not levy for those 2 amounts. We also realized savings from different places within our, our internal systems or our internal departments, because we're trying to figure out ways of which to save the district money that is going to have some long-term benefits, and some of those are listed here for your information. We're pretty proud of what we're doing right now with our SMART goals and department efficiencies to save money within every department in our school district, and we've done things to try to, create a pretty lean structure that allows us to find those efficiencies. We know that anytime we can save in those efficiencies, we're able to support our kids in bigger ways, and we've been able to do that with some improvements around the school. This is our district improvement scorecard. This is put out annually. This scorecard includes every department, and it gives you metrics from year to year to year, which helps us understand kind of some of the places that we're finding ways to work more effectively and efficiently. So this is posted on our school website, but we've been able to do this in several areas of which we're proud of, including food service, transportation, and technology. So this is our final budget, our revenue limit, the top cap of what it is the calculation allows us to authorize in terms of revenue. That authority includes $8,663,886. Our equalization aid, that part coming from the state, and then of course the last but not least, what our local taxpayers pick up in terms of the total tax levy. This is the final mill rate and how that's all calculated. So you can kind of see we have a school-based tax levy that we have, and then we know what our property value is that was assessed in October 22, and then we of course multiply that by 1,000, and it's $6.68 per $1,000. This is our mill rate history. We are at the lowest mill rate by far. I've looked past 25 years and it's probably the lowest ever, but I don't have anything more than 25 years. But we're proud to be at $6.68, and we are in year 1 of an operational referendum. If nothing changed at the state level, this would continue to go down even with that operational referendum. So, and that would have been the same case had we passed our capital. Also question that we failed by 11 votes this April. This would have still continued to go down each year. And that's just how the calculation works. So here is our mill rates and how that has impacted you as a community member. So here again is our $6.68 for 22-23, or this school year. It decreased by 14%. And so it shares here a little bit of the savings that it was to our taxpayer to have that mill rate decline by 14%. And then here, of course, is a way for you to calculate that, your own individual, if you wanted to kind of take a peek at that. There are other ways of which our districts save money. One of those is Fund 73. We have a balance in there, but we also, we sort of reorganized and redesigned our post-retirement benefit with our certified staff, and we saved the district almost $1 million by doing that. And so we are at a very healthy place with this fund balance to fund our post-retirement benefits for right now through perpetuity. We don't anticipate that we'll have to fund that particular piece anytime soon. Not in my lifetime anyway. We also have a Capital Fund 46, which is a capital account. That is money that we've put some money into. We don't have a lot there, but we have been trying to save what we can for the purpose of capital projects. And so the last deposit into that account was 2020, and we cannot access those funds until 2023. So the next steps in the last part of this three-part series is just kind of looking at the forecast. So one of the things I would like to share is even with a $950,000 operational budget, which we have for the next 4 years, thanks to our community for supporting us and our kids in April 22. We are still at a projected deficit. So you can see we balanced our budget for 22-23. This year, next year, 23-24 and beyond, you will see that our deficit continues to increase. If nothing changed at the state level, our school revenue has been frozen for 2 years. If nothing changed, we would still have to make reductions and cuts to address this projected deficit, even with that $950,000 each year. So the biennium budget for our public schools is a very important time of year for us to kind of do more planning and anticipation of what we can think about in terms of funding. And so because we froze school funding, we're have this artificially deflated mill rate. That mill rate is determined based on the amount of money coming to school districts through the equalization aid. And so as that equalization aid amount goes up, the mill rate goes down or the tax rate goes down, because remember, we're capped at the amount of revenue we can bring in. And so when there was some narrative about money going into schools, well, the money went into schools through the equalization aid. It didn't give schools any more money because we still have a limit. We have a revenue cap. But it went in through the equalization aid, so it artificially deflated a community's mill rate. So with nothing else changing, that mill rate is going to go up with any money to public schools. So the other impact that we've had, as all of us experience in our private lives, is that impact of inflation. So between inflation and this artificial deflation of mill rate with frozen school funding, we are sort of in this perfect storm right now, and why you're seeing all the referenda on the questionnaire for the election in November in another week here. We also had ESSER funding. We have used our ESSER funding at this point. We have, I think, a little bit left maybe in ESSER 2, but we've spent a significant portion for one-time costs. We really wanted to figure out how to save our taxpayers the most money, and that was through getting our rooftop units, which are air handling units. They are over 25 years old. They came with the building, and it was time we had to replace them, so we used that money for that purpose. The rest of this $1.9 million has to be used for research-based strategies, which is part of the legislation that was passed to give schools that money. So we have to use that for very specific things. The other thing that we funded through those ESSER funds would be interventionist and special education supports. And so those have been some big things for us. Last but not least, the next steps is really from my level and our school board's level to look at how we advocate on behalf of our Necedah school community and look at kind of some authority and spending because again, we were frozen. Our special education aid is at about 23% funded, and I've shared before that about $2,000 of every non-disabled child, their revenue per member is going to fund those special education costs. And we really need to figure out how to better fund special education needs. That is an important piece for us. And then last but not least, mental health continues to be a need of our children, and we do need to continue to think creatively about how we meet those needs of our precious kids. So this is just more information regarding some shifts that we've seen in terms of funding in Wisconsin, where we were at in terms of 11 highest, which was 11% above the average, and now we're at 25th, which is 5.6% below the national average. So we have really in the last few years here taken a dive in terms of our commitment to fund the education of our children, and that is something that's important right now when when I, as a advocate of children, are advocating regarding public school spending, and these will be the 3 priorities that I do that. So that is the end of my presentation. I know I went a little bit longer today, but I wanted to end and share everything I had. This presentation is on our district website, as well as all 3 videos. And there is always a time to ask questions. So if you want to reach out to me because anything was confusing, I know it can be complicated. So please just ask me, and if I don't know, I will find out. But it's really important for the education of our community to help people understand a little bit about school finance, so you understand how your tax dollars are being spent. And if you have questions, please just always reach out. That's all I have for today. I just want to thank everybody for joining me, and again, reach out if you need anything. I will see you next week for some generalized updates, and if nobody's told you they love you today, I love you guys. Have a good rest of the day.